Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia. Welcome back to another episode of our Let's Talk Lore, The Last Tyrant. We are on episode 6, titled The Last Days of Luoyang. So previously in our story, we have talked about how Dong Zhuo rescued the emperor, and we're going to give you guys a nice timeline from the time that Dong Zhuo enters the capital to the fall of Luoyang. So starting with August 28th in the year 189, Dong Zhuo rescued the two emperors outside the capital from the eunuchs. And following that date, he returns to the capital. And on the very next day, he convinces Lü Bu to betray Ding Yuan and joins up with Dong Zhuo, which we covered in our last episode. From this point on, Dong Zhuo is now the most powerful force inside the capital. And he is going to push his agenda of forcing the young emperor Liu Bian to abdicate, to hand it over to his younger brother Liu Xie, who he felt connected to simply because of Liu Xie's connection to Empress Dowager Dong and being nicknamed Lord Dong, even though Empress Dowager Dong had no relationship with Dong Zhuo himself. So the first thing he did on August 29th is that he invited Yuan Shao over to his home to discuss abdication. And during this meeting, Yuan Shao snubs Dong Zhuo. Now we have to think about why Dong Zhuo invites over Yuan Shao, because Yuan Shao represents the new generation, and not only that, he comes from the Yuan clan, who is one of the two most powerful clans inside the capital. There are two clans in the imperial court who can call themselves 四世三公, which means that in the past 4 generations, someone in the clan has risen to the position of Sangong, or one of the Grand Excellency positions, in each of the last 4 generations. So very deeply rooted inside the government. The Yuan clan is one of that clan, and the second clan is the Yang clan, which we'll see later on in the story as well. So Dong Zhuo approaches Yuan Shao because Yuan Shao also had command of the captain of the 8 guards of the West Palace, which is this leftover army that the emperor had left, Liu Hong has left, to try to help push for Liu Xie to become the emperor. But Yuan Shao had no interest in that, and Yuan Shao basically debates with Dong Zhuo, saying that, who do you think you are to ask for such a treasonous demand, right? You're basically forcing this emperor who has done nothing wrong to abdicate, to give it to this younger brother, which makes no sense to Confucian culture. So Yuan Shao's plan here is he asked Dong Zhuo that maybe it's best to ask his uncle Yuan Wei, who at the time is the grand tutor. Now Yuan Wei is the old crafty fox of the Yuan clan, but Dong Zhuo doesn't want to approach Yuan Wei and demands that Yuan Shao obeys. But Yuan Shao basically storms out of Dong Zhuo's home, spites him, and escapes the capital, escaping to Bohai, where he plans to build up his own force. So Dong Zhuo, seeing that Yuan Shao is not willing to listen to him, goes to Yuan Wei. And Yuan Wei, being the crafty operator in the government for such a long time, agrees with Dong Zhuo. So the very next day, in the imperial court, Dong Zhuo brings up the idea of abdication to the entire court, and basically demand that you guys need to follow this idea or die. And the only person who stood up to this idea that day at court is Lu Zhi. So previously we talked about this story of, Ding Yuan standing up and Lu Zhi standing up in our last episode, but because we were telling the betrayal of Lü Bu, those stories were from the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. That was a bit fictional, but taken from context from history. And today our timeline will be entirely historical. And during this court meeting, Lu Zhi comes out and basically debates Dong Zhuo, telling him the unethical nature of his proposal. And Lu Zhi completely irritates Dong Zhuo, and Dong Zhuo asks for Lu Zhi's head. And at this point, Cai Yong comes out and pleads for mercy to spare Lu Zhi. Now, Cai Yong is a very, very famous calligrapher, scholar, pretty much on par with Lu Zhi, if not more. But he was a victim of the party incident, and he has been forgiven during the Yellow Turban mess, but he's highly respected. So Dong Zhuo listens to him and spares Lu Zhi, basically firing him and putting him into early retirement, and Lu Zhi goes home, which is in the northeast region of China. And with Lu Zhi removed and no one else dared to speak up, the very next day, on September 1st, Liu Bian abdicates the throne. His younger brother Liu Xie takes over and becomes Emperor Xian of the Eastern Han Dynasty. And on the same day, since Emperor Liu Bian is no more, his birth mother, Empress He, who is still alive at this point, is suddenly imprisoned with the crime of causing the death of the past Emperor Dowager Dong. Now at this point, Empress Dowager Dong had died for a long while, and Empress He probably didn't have any direct effect in killing her. She probably died of old age. But what Dong Zhuo is suggesting is that Empress He neglected to take care of Empress Dowager Dong. So it's kind of an arbitrary crime placed on her to imprison her and strip her of her title now that her birth son is no longer the emperor, and Liu Xie, who was raised by Empress Dowager Dong, is now the emperor. So kind of hitting two birds with one stone, taking down Liu Bian and Empress He, and also removing any Empress Dowager to rise in power, because Liu Xie's birth mother, Lady Wang, as we remembered, was poisoned by Empress He a long time ago. So that's why he was raised by Empress Dowager Dong in the first place, which is basically his grandmother. So there is no Empress Dowager, there is no Empress, because Liu Xie is very, very young. So the only person in power as the regent is now Dong Zhuo. And to make sure Empress He would not rise in power again, on September 3rd, Dong Zhuo poisons and kills Empress He. And not only does he kill her, he prevents anyone from hosting a funeral for her, so that none of the two child emperors are allowed to mourn for her. So it's kind of a very tragic situation that he created, and many people blamed him for this. And not long after, on September 12th, Dong Zhuo reshuffles the government to consolidate his power in court by removing himself from the Grand Excellency position and putting himself into the Grand Commandant position, and also naming himself the General of the Front, which gives him basically the firm military control of the capital, and also giving himself the title of Duke of Mei. Now, Mei County is an area that's southwest of Chang'an, so it's a bit out west, but it's closer to where he came from originally. And his move here also meant he got to choose who took over the two other Grand Excellency positions, and he put in place a few guys that he felt were not only famous scholars, but also loyal to him. In Dong Zhuo's mind, he knew he, as an outsider, is going to have a very hard time controlling the court. So given the fact that the eunuchs are now all gone, he tried his best to bribe all the scholars to be on his side. So he handed out large amount of positions to scholars and people from powerful clans to try to buy their loyalty. And we can see this move continue into late September, as all scholars from the party incident that happened over 20 years ago are now all pardoned and reused by government. And some of the key figures who are now in their 60s and 70s from the scholar movement, like Cai Yong, who we mentioned earlier, Xun Shuang, who comes from the famous Xun clan in the Inchuan region, and Chen Ji, are now given high key government positions. And the people that proposed this pardon is led by the Sangong at the time, which is Dong Zhuo, Huang Wan, and Yang Biao. Now, Yang Biao here comes from that powerful Yang clan that we talked about earlier, and these three people were all basically appointed by Dong Zhuo himself as the three most powerful figure in government. And not only that, the young generation of these powerful clan members were also given key administrative roles in their local regions by Dong Zhuo, as of olive branch to all of them. So people like Han Fu, Liu Dai, Kong Zhou, Kong Rong, Ying Shao, Zhang Miao, Yuan Shao, Wang Kuan, Bao Xin are all named to administrator roles. So that's why we find a lot of these guys where they are in the 190 start of the campaign. You can see them all over the map here. And they were all named by Dong Zhuo from the advice of two of his advisors, Zhou Bi and Wu Qiong. Now, Zhou Bi here is someone who's been with Dong Zhuo for a long time, because Zhou Bi's father was Zhou Shen, And if you remember, Zhou Shen was Sun Jian's old commander and participated in many of the Liang rebellion battles. So these are old Liang region people who stayed with Dong Zhuo over time. And we see them in the 182 start as the Nominator of Worth and the Seeker of Talent, because it was them that appointed these younger generation powerful clan members into their key administrative roles. Now the ending for these two guys are not so great, because many of the names that we just read will end up forming the coalition that will rise up against Dong Zhuo later on. So Dong Zhuo regrets very much appointing them into their key administrative roles and blames this on Zhou Bi and Wu Qiong later on. But regardless, life in Luoyang only gets worse. As we go into October, Dong Zhuo finally hosts a burial for Empress He with the sole intention of opening up Liu Hong's tomb, because Empress and the Emperor need to be buried together. And during the process of the burial, Dong Zhuo's men loots Liu Hong's tomb, giving him the first taste of the treasures hidden in these Emperor's tomb, as we'll see in a later episode that Dong Zhuo is going to end up looting all the Eastern Han Dynasty Emperor's tombs before he burns down Luoyang. And not only that, throughout the month of October, Dong Zhuo's forces, made up of largely Qiang and Xiongnu auxiliary units, are not used to the calm life in the capital and will frequently go out to loot civilians, to take their money and treasure as their own, and kill some of the men and rape some of the women. It was a very chaotic month in the capital, and this was the turning point where many people started to hate Dong Zhuo. But for Dong Zhuo himself, he thinks he has firm control of the power. And on November 1st, he names himself into a new position called Xiangguo, which is equivalent of prime minister role that places himself above the traditional Sangong positions or the Grand Excellency positions. And not only this, he gives himself special rights, like not having to be named when approaching the emperor, being able to wear his shoes when going to the imperial court, being able to carry his sword in the imperial court. Basically, all things that show signs of lack of respect to the emperor. And at this point, many of the local administrators and those loyal to the Han has finally realized that Dong Zhuo has no intention of respecting the throne. So in late November, Qiao Mao, who is the administrator of Dong, as we can find him here at the 182 start. Now the game removes him for Huang Shao later on for the 190 start, but technically Qiao Mao should still be there in 190. He forges a government edict saying that it's from the three excellency positions, asking the warlords of all of China to fight and remove Dong Zhuo. Now those in the imperial court never wrote this document. Qiao Mao forged this entirely by himself, and he spread it all across the northeast region and the central plains. And many of the local warlords rally to his cause, saying that Dong Zhuo has wrongly abdicated Liu Bian, and that Liu Bian should stay the emperor, and Liu Xie, the younger brother, should have no claim to the throne. So they are rallying behind the call of Qiao Mao to remove Dong Zhuo from court and restoring the Han by putting Liu Bian back on the throne. So to fix this in Dong Zhuo's mind, he asked Li Ru, his advisor, to poison the former Emperor Liu Bian, who is currently living in the imperial palace, and ending this rallying cry of the coalition members. But clearly this backfires, as at the end of the year, the famous Guangdong coalition forms against Dong Zhuo, led by Yuan Shao. And we're going to get into the Guangdong coalition in our next episode as we talk about how these different warlords banded together to try to take down Dong Zhuo, forcing him to abandon Luoyang and escape to Chang'an. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and see you all next time. Bye!